It defies common sense. In fact, you probably couldn't find anyone who thinks it's a good idea to text behind the wheel. And yet the number of crashes involving drivers distracted by their cell phones continues to rise. Authorities say it's how an MBTA bus ended up dangling over the Mass Pike in Newton last month. And now the Transit Authority is enforcing a strict new no phone policy. Never mind using a phone. From now on, bus and train operators are prohibited from having a cell phone on the job altogether. Drivers caught with a device in their possession face an automatic 30-day suspension and will be recommended for termination. T officials say it could be the strictest cell phone policy in the nation, but does it go too far? We asked passerbys that question earlier today in Copley Square.
Since there's been a few accidents lately, it makes sense that there's harsher punishment for them if they're caught texting.
I think that's a little harsh. I think you should be able to have your phone when you're still in part of your workday, but when you're on your own time and not company time.
You have people's lives in your hands, and the bus has a lot of mass associated with it, and you really don't want to make a mistake, so you want people as concentrated and as focused upon their driving and on their efforts as they possibly can be.
I think they should be able to leave it at a secure location for when they get to work, in case for emergency purposes. That's why we have cell phones in the first place.
If there's a personal emergency, they could call dispatch and have the driver reach that way. It's just not necessary.
Well, if the drivers can't use cell phones responsibly, then they'll lose the privilege. It sounds like that's what's happened.
Here to share his take on the T's new policy is former State Transportation Secretary Jim Aloisi. Welcome back to Greater Boston.
Nice to be here.
So it's easy for these people to say.
Yes.
But try taking the cell phone from any one of those people who just spoke up. I don't care what their job is. It seems to me that this goes a little bit too far. I mean, isn't this kind of a case of punishing the many for the indiscretions of a few?
No, Emily, I actually think it goes as far as it should. Look, we have people who are driving buses and subway trains who have people's lives in their hands. In 2008 in California, 25 people were killed because the conductor of the train on the Metroliner was texting. When I was secretary in 2009, we had 45 people injured when someone was texting and Green Line trains crashed. So these things happen, they're real, and we have to put a stop to them. If you want to be in that business of driving a bus or a subway train, you give something up, and what you give up is the temptation to be distracted by a cell phone.
Okay, I got to tell you something. As a woman, and if I was driving a night beat and there was unsavory car, I know you have the two-way and the thing, but that could be disabled. I would want to have a phone for an emergency, or maybe something with, you know, an elderly parent or a child at school. I mean, of course you're not going to be using the thing texting while doing it. That's already against the law.
Well, but you say, of course you're not, but in fact people are.
But
and
not
I believe,
that many.
Well, but it only takes one person to have in a situation where some people get killed. It's just, you know, the MBTA is primarily responsible for safe mobility and reliable mobility. So I think they have to lay the law down. Now the MBTA has competition. You've got a private sector company called Bridge that's offering people a bus alternative at a higher price, a nicer bus. I can guarantee you that the people driving those buses are not allowed to text or to use their phone. Of course not.
No one is allowed to text.
So, or to even have a phone in their possession.
I'm going to check that out.
The phone in their possession is a temptation, and a temptation becomes, unfortunately for many people, an avenue that leads to real trouble.
Shouldn't you be? I can't believe I'm even debating this because I'm not soft on crime or anything like that. But shouldn't you be able to have one for your lunch break? I mean, this idea that you can't even go to the workplace. What about having a secure location so that, you know, if you're back at the shop, you know, you've got it there? I mean.
Well, in 2009, when the accident occurred in the Green Line, we imposed the first rules here, and we said at the time, look, if you want to keep it in your locker, you can do that, but you can't have it with you. I think that this recent incident with the bus was the straw that broke the camel's back. And yes, it's harsh. And sometimes harsh measures are necessary, A, to send a message, B, to be effective. Is there a technology, an approach in the future that can enable those bus drivers and subway trolley drivers to have some access? Perhaps. Not today. I think we need to have a moratorium. I think the T's doing the right thing. People need to know that when they pay that Charlie card fee, that they're not going to have an injury or worse because someone makes a mistake.
Is this enforceable, though? I mean, I have to sign a paper that says I don't have a cell phone with me, but if I really need my phone that day, I mean, you're not going to pat me down or go through all my bags and everything, and then, you know, you're on your lunch break and it's like, you know.
I think it's on the T to make it enforceable. And I think the other thing that we need to think about, there's a technology called positive train control. They've implemented it in California.
Positive what?
Positive train control. It's basically a way to stop the train automatically. Oh. So there are technologies that can be used. I would point out, in California, that was a $215 million fix. And the federal government only paid 10%. So these things are expensive. In the meantime, before we can implement that kind of expensive technology, taking away the right and privilege.
Yeah, I was going to say, that technology would not have stopped this idiot from
going off
the
bus.
Newton Bridge there.
And I think what happens is people just say, there's only one way we can assure you that that won't happen again, and that's to make sure that person or people who are driving those buses simply don't have that.
All right. I feel bad. All right. Jim Aloisi, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.